There we go. Hi, Mom. How are you?
Excellent. It's hot here, but we're gonna make it through the next 2 weeks.
And hopefully your power stays on.
Well, yeah, if the power grid couldn't handle 101 degrees, I don't know what they're gonna do when the next 2 weeks are over 105.
So, what are we talking about today? I think this is kind of a fun topic.
Actually, a lot of podcasters have been doing this exact same topic, and it is a mid-year discussion of our top 5 best books.
Perfect. All right. Well, why don't you start?
Well, I've read a lot this year. My numbers are way up there. And up through June, I've read 75 books. And out of them, 27 have been at least 4 stars. So
Very good.
I've been having really good luck in what I've chosen to read. And out of those, 5 books were 5 stars. And I'm a pretty generous grader when it comes to assigning star ratings. So this is less than I usually have, but I have high hopes for the second half of this year. I think there are going to be a lot more 5-star books for me.
Okay.
The interesting thing about the 5 books that did make it to 5 stars is that each one of them is in a different genre, which I thought was
Really?
interesting because I'll read my mysteries and I'll read my historical fiction, but it just surprised me that my taste was more diverse, which I think is a good thing.
That's very good. Mine are not at all like that. Mine are all in the same genre, which I'm sorry to
really?
say. Yeah.
We're going to have to work on that and get you to branch out more.
I need help with contemporary literature,
Well,
contemporary fiction.
there are some really good ones coming along, so I'll encourage you to give them a try.
Okay. So give me your first one.
All right, my first book, I actually read this back in January, and the title of the book is Shenville. The author is Paulette Giles, and it was published last fall in September 2023 by William Morrow. This book is historical fiction, so that lands solidly in one of my very favorite genres. The book is an odyssey, and it's also a revenge tale. Now, I love a good revenge tale. So here's the setup. Our main character is Civil War Union soldier John Shenville. And he has suffered a very traumatic head injury just towards the end of the Civil War. And he's been in a Civil War rehab hospital for a year or more, recovering from this terrible injury. And when he's finally well enough to go home, he returns to his plantation, which I believe is in Louisville, Kentucky. And he returns home, and he learns then that his beloved sister, her husband, and their infant child have been brutally murdered while he's been recovering in the hospital. And even though John Shenville is basically a really good-hearted, kind man, he becomes obsessed with the idea of seeking retribution and avenging the death of his sister and her family.
Mm-hmm.
So he decides to embark on this odyssey throughout the lower part of the United States, think, Texas area, and search for this person who's the villain. And it turns out that this villain is a serial killer. And we follow the deeds of this terrible man with John Shenville, hot on his heels to try to find him. We never meet the villain. John Shenville and the serial killer, never meet. But this is a really interesting story of the obsession of John Shenville trying to catch up to this person, the people he meets along the way, just like in any odyssey. There's all kinds of characters that you meet that are met on the journey.
Yeah.
Anyway, the question is, will his quest for revenge cost Shenville more than he's already lost?
Wow.
Because he's really just thrown himself into this passion of trying to find the villain at the sacrifice of everything else, his home, his
Yeah.
everything. So anyway, that was 5 stars. I was absolutely engrossed in this book. Another book by the same author, Paulette Giles, was News
Mhm.
of the World, which was made into a movie starring Tom Hanks. And that's the story of a man about the same time, the after the Civil War. And the main character in that book travels around throughout the country reading the news of the world from various newspapers to citizens in these towns and villages.
That's
And
fascinating.
on his journey, somebody stops him and tells him that they've got this child who had been kidnapped by some Native American tribe and has been with the Native Americans for all of these years of her life. And they need her returned to her family in Minnesota. And this girl knows nothing else except her life with the tribe that has raised her. And she doesn't want to go. So
No.
anyway, that was a good book too. I don't mean to digress and tell you about 2 books there, but both,
That's all right.
anything by this author is very good.
Does she always tend to write in that time period?
Well, I don't think so. She's got
Okay.
several other titles in her backlist, but I haven't read them, so I can't say for sure.
Okay. Well, okay, that sounds like a good one. My first 5-star that I'm going to talk about for this year is the one that I just finished reading. And I listened to this on Libby. So it was an audiobook that I borrowed from my local library system. This is Sourdough. I think we talked about this briefly last time that I was going to read this. And this is
Right.
by Robin Sloan. Robin has written Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookshop. That was quite popular a couple of years ago. So Sourdough came out September 5th of 2017, and it's published by MCD Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. Now, this is one that my brother recommended to me, and I love that this takes place in San Francisco. So our main character, Lois, is working as a software engineer at a very prestigious, very ambitious startup in San Francisco. And it is a company that creates like robot arms and helps you. It's called General Dexterity. And the idea is that she is spending her days coding and she spends her nights exhausted. It's basically like a factory. And for anyone who's worked at a startup or a San Francisco based startup, I have a teeny tiny amount of experience there. It was like a factory. And so, you were expected to work all the time. But anyway, so she really has no life. But she finds a flyer for a neighborhood like local takeout deliveries place that will bring food to her. So she ends up befriending these 2 brothers who make an incredible sourdough bread and deliver soup to her. So she has these great friends, and they suddenly have some visa issues and they have to leave the country. And they give her the sourdough starter. And despite not being a baker, she finds herself baking bread.
In her
And
spare time.
at night, so she's really not sleeping now. The sourdough starter is a little bit magical in that it sings, it changes color, it has a personality, and when she bakes the bread, it has a face on each loaf that kind of appears. So she starts selling this to her company, to the chef at the cafeteria. And then she ends up getting into a very prestigious farmer's market. So this is a little bit like a journey of self-discovery. She's learning that she has other interests, hobbies that she can make her own living for herself. She doesn't have to work for necessarily for the startup. and she makes a ton of new friends, but she's also exploring the food scene in California. So there's a lot of similarities here if you're familiar with the food scene in California. There's an Alice Waters type of a character. There's a French Laundry type of restaurant. Lots of really fun, atmospheric, notable California places, San Francisco places. So if you're, again, familiar with the city, it's very fun. I have a friend right now who's based in Tampa who is building and creating, it's been years in the process of a food court. And it is going to be very high tech, very cutting edge. And I recommended this book to her so that she has additional ideas for the business. So anyway, this was really, really fun. And if you like technology, if you like a little hint of magical realism and newfound family, then this is definitely a fantastic book. So it was
You have
5 stars.
absolutely made me want to read it.
It's very cozy, lots of fun characters. One side note is that Lois, there is a club. I don't think this is a real thing, but I hope it is. That she joins, she realizes she has no friends. So she joins a local chapter of the Lois Club where Loises meet. They all have the same name. And so
how many
they
people have
meet.
you ever met named Lois in your life?
Well, apparently in San Francisco in this book, there were like 12. And there was like clever Lois, short Lois, 90-year-old Lois. Anyway, it's fun. Lots of great characters.
What format did you read this book in?
Oh, Audible. I'm not Audible. Audio book through Libby, the app that lets you download digital content from your local library.
I am absolutely going to read that book. It sounds so good.
It's very cozy too, I would say, despite all of the wacky things I just mentioned. It's very cozy.
Well, I've made bread before, and I've often thought that the dough had a mind of its own. So.
Well, do you remember like every time I go on a diet, I start like interests in making bread, even though I'm not supposed to be eating carbs. And so here we are again. I'm reading book. I'm not baking bread, but I'm reading books about bread.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, my second book was a real surprise to me. I never would have thought I would have enjoyed this book as much as I did, but I kept hearing about it. And so I thought, well, I'll pick it up. The book is Search by Michelle Hunovan, and it was published in April of 2022 by Penguin Press. And I'd categorize this book as contemporary literary fiction. And it's about a group of people who have been selected by their Unitarian church to hire their next minister. Now, the book isn't religious at all, but it deals more with group dynamics and just what happens when a decision has to be made and the group trying to come to that decision is too diverse to come to a consensus. I think, the book is supposed to be fictional, but I have read that it's based on the author's real life experience, which I sincerely hope went much better than the tale that she's telling in this novel. There's a lot of humor in the book, but the characters come across as all too real. The fictional search committee is made up of these self-serving individuals with little concern for what the wishes of the congregation. They all have their own agenda. Like there's one woman who says, okay, we're not having any more white male, no more male patriarchy figureheads at the helm of our church. We need a gay feminist woman to be the minister. I mean, she clearly had her own agenda. She wasn't even listening to any of the other candidates. So if you've what?
Sorry, are all of the main characters in the search committee, are they all female?
No, not at all.
Okay.
The committee is made up of 5 or 6 very different people of different genders, different ages,
walks of life.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So the people on the committee are very diverse. And of course, the idea of the congregation is that they should have a very cast a wide net and be open to people of all kinds of ethnicities and different walks of life. So the congregation doesn't have anything specific in mind. They just want to find the right person to lead their church. And have you ever worked on a committee in any of in your job? I mean, it's all about teams now in the corporate life. And sometimes you get paired up with people on the team that are absolutely impossible to work with.
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, it's an incredible challenge. And how we ever get to a good decision is a miracle, really. The descriptions of the personalities on this particular search committee are just too real and very funny. You're going to roll your eyes and you're going to want to throttle some of these people. But all in all, this book is a really thoughtful study of human dynamics and how we work together in a group. So I really enjoyed it. Also, our main character, as well as being on this search committee, her real job is she's a food critic. And so there are all kinds of allusions to restaurants and different dishes that she's had. I mean, it seems like a non sequitur, but it's kind of fun.
That's good.
So anyway, that one was a real surprise, and I recommend that people give it a try because they might be surprised as I was too, as how enjoyable the book was.
I remember when you started reading that, you were quite enthralled with it. So I'm glad that it made the list so far.
Yeah, sure did.
All right. So this is the next one I'm going to talk about is one that I also read recently. And it's one that I discussed with my brother on the last episode. But I do want to mention it again here because I think really it is going to be in my top 5 at the end of this year. I believe it. So this is The Miracles of the Namiya General Store by Keigo Higashino. And now I didn't realize this. This book I had put on my wish list, and then my stepson bought this for me. But Keigo Higashino has written like The Devotion of Suspect X, which is a book that you bought me, right?
Yes.
He writes detective and thriller novels. And this is a little bit of he's going into a different genre here. This is a little bit more magical realism. And what I love about this, again, this came out in September 24th, 2019 by the publisher Yen On. And this is basically a story that does go into a little bit of time travel, where we're not actually traveling through time, but we are affecting a different time period through a letter correspondence. And this has to do with 3 criminals who find an abandoned general store. They had a botched robbery. They're on a little hideout from the police. And so they find this abandoned store that's nobody's been in for 40 years. And they realize that time stops when they are in the building. And then when they open the doors to the building or they step out for a moment, time starts again. So what's happening is they realize that they are getting letters through the mail slot. The former owner 40 years ago was this kindly old man who was giving advice to people in the neighborhood who wanted to submit questions anonymously. And then he would take his time and write them back. And so these criminals keep getting these letters through the mail and or through the door. And they realize that when they respond, they are affecting the timeline of things, even up to present day, by the advice that they're giving. And each chapter is really broken out into different stories of the people who are asking for advice. And this is typically taking place now then in the 80s. And all of these stories are central to a children's orphanage. And we're going to find that all of these characters that are interacting with one another are also, their lives are integrated, even though they don't know. And so I found this incredibly heartwarming. As I told my brother, I read this when I was really exhausted emotionally and physically from traveling. And I cried after every chapter on the plane, which is not normal behavior for me. So I do think it is that good. It was very, very heartwarming, all of it. Shocking plot twist. The ending was absolutely incredible, where this like time loop is connecting itself, and it was just mind blowing. So I loved it. You should read it.
Well,
It's
you've
fantastic.
got another good one here that I'm adding to my list.
Yeah.
What
Yeah, it's
format?
wholesome.
What format did
This
you
was
read this?
this was a paperback that I read.
Oh, and your stepson gave it to you.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds really, really good.
I loved it.
Well, my next book, excuse me, is sorry.
Eva and I made cucumber water, so we've been sipping
Oh,
our
that's
cucumber water.
Are we good?
Mhm.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I had a little fit there. My next book was Ruthless Vows by Rachel Ross. This was published in April of 2023 by Wednesday Books. It's part of a duology in the genre young adult fantasy romance. So this is, first of all, I don't really read much fantasy. I very rarely read anything young adult.
This is a
And
romantasy.
it's a romantasy. And this
Ooh.
book and its sequel, Divine Rivals, were just so well done. The author was so clever in the way she set up her world. The book is set in another world, but it has a feel of World War II. And the country that they live in is at war. The war has been started between two rival gods. So think Greek mythology, and Zeus and Athena are at war for some reason. And there are two rival journalists who are our main characters. And they both work for the same newspaper, and they're vying for the same permanent position. Both of them are temporary, but they really want to get hired on staff. And they're in hot competition with one another. So our main female character is named Iris, and her brother has gone away to war. He went to fight for whichever god he identified most strongly with. And once he joined up, he's never been heard from again.
Oh,
So
wow.
Iris has no idea how to contact her brother, but she starts writing him letters anyway on a very special typewriter that's been in her family for a long time. She doesn't have any way to really mail these since she doesn't know where he is. And so she writes her letters on this very special typewriter and puts them in her closet. And she finds the next day when she goes into her closet that her letter's been answered. Not by her brother, but by someone she doesn't know, an anonymous sender. And the sender turns out to be her rival at the newspaper. And he has a very special typewriter. And it turns out the magic is all has to do with these typewriters. So he seems so sensitive and so caring and so opposite of this guy that she works with that she hates.
Yeah.
So they end up falling in love, not knowing who the identities of the other person that they're writing to. Anyway, it's all about the correspondence that they have, the coming awareness of themselves in relation to the world and what's going on in it. Anyway, I was totally caught up in their story, and I think you would be too. I know you've read Rebecca Ross before. Didn't you read A River Enchanted?
I have not yet. I bought it though, but I haven't read it yet. So now I really have to.
Well, she's a really good author, and this duology was just excellent.
Good.
And then
All
the
right.
second book, which is called Divine Rivals, Ruthless Vows ends on somewhat of a cliffhanger, and Divine Rivals starts up at that point and continues the story to its conclusion. and we learn more about the two gods that are at war and why.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
This one
it's gripping.
makes me think of Becca and Tomoko, I think, would really like this as well. Becca for her interest in
Yeah.
World War II and earlier. So anyway, cool. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. You really are convincing me I need to pick those up. I will have to get some. I think they're both still available from Book of the Month. So maybe
They sure are. And they're nice
I'll do
editions.
that.
They look nice together on the bookshelf.
Cool. All right. So my third best of book here so far was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel.
Oh,
Did we talk
really?
about this? I don't remember. I don't think we did.
I think you
So
and Aaron talked about it, but I thought you had some prejudice against this author because you'd read something else and didn't like
I
it.
did. I hated Station 11. Emily St. John Mandel has a very, it's a specific writing style. I find it to be very slow building, but it is also very detailed in that she's really trying to give you a sense of place, which I do love. This was published May 5th, 2022 by Knopf. This was also the Goodreads Choice Award for Sci-Fi in 2022. So I won't go into this one too much. I just want to mention that it was a 5-star read for me. Again, another time travel. This one has a incredible loop, but it also has that historical fiction feel to it because we start out in 1912 with a phenomenon that happens, and then different people experience the same phenomenon um, in 200 years forward, all up until from 1912 until 500 years forward on a lunar colony. So we get to go to Vancouver Island on Earth. We also are on a moon colony, and the moon colony is so old and decrepit now that it's falling apart, which is fascinating to me because of the way that Emily describes this. So it's just really interesting to go through this. Also, one of the main characters is an author who is on a book tour. So there's lots of fun elements here. I really enjoyed it. There's also trigger warning. There's kind of a plague that happens.
Okay.
And so there's that, but really fantastic read. So I'll just leave it there.
Another good one. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my next book I've talked about a lot, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail either. This book was Colton Gentry's Third Act by Jeff Zentner, published in April of this year by Grand Central Publishing. And it's a romance about second chances.
Ooh.
And as I say, I've already talked an awful lot about it, but I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's funny. The author he's so amusing, but at the same time, he's sensitive. And he writes just a heck of a good story. I really, really enjoy his writing. And I can't wait for him to come out with another book because I will absolutely buy it. And if you want to know a more detailed review, you can check out our previous podcast. And you can also read a written review on my blog, Sister's Choice Quilts, or follow me on Goodreads.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, all right. I also, you mentioned this already, but I appreciate that was a male author writing romance. So,
Yes, and he did a darn good job of it.
all right. So, my next book for 5-star reads is Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This was from April
I've read that.
26th.
I think I've read that. It was wonderful.
It was really good. 2022, this came out by Tor. So, more fantasy sci-fi because Tor always, that's what they do. That's what they publish. And I loved the premise of this. And this has been a very popular book. So you may have read this already. But Mara is the shy third-born daughter raised her parents are royalty, but like very low, low in stature. Like they don't have a lot of money. It's a small little kingdom. So she's sent away to a convent because she really, really does not want to get married. And she basically ends up understanding that her sister, actually she had 2 sisters, who the eldest was married off to this bad guy prince, and she died not mysteriously, I would say nefariously. And then the second sister was then married off to the same guy. So this sister is having a really horrible time of things. She's being abused and so on and so forth. So Mara decides that she's going to leave the convent. She's going to go on this quest to figure out how to save her sister and get her sister out of this mess. She seeks out a grave witch, and this is someone who is she's got magical powers. She's very involved in the magical realm. So she has a lot of insight into other dimensions. And again, this is definitely a fantasy book here. And she seeks out the grave witch. The grave witch reluctantly agrees to help her but first she has to complete 3 impossible tasks, which is where we get the title here of Nettle and Bone. But this is a tale of princes, witches, daughters, sisters. There's a very reluctant fairy godmother, a former knight, a demon-possessed chicken, and together they aim to end the prince's tyranny and free Mara's family and their kingdom. So this is dark and atmospheric. It's not silly, despite the demon-possessed chicken. The chicken adds a bit of lightheartedness here and there. And I really loved the theme of a sister trying to save a sister. It's a little bit like it reminds me of Frozen with Anna and Elsa. Like it's not about like a princess who needs saving by a prince. So I really appreciate that. And I also love the theme of all of the main characters are utilizing their core skills. Like they're using what they do best to make an impact and make a difference together. So there's not just one person who's like forgive me, but like the Jesus Christ of the story, and it has all the power and is doing all the things. Like they're all flawed and yet have some special traits that they are embracing. So really loved it. Fantastic.
Sounds like a page turner.
Very much.
Was it a lot of fantasies are extremely long books? Was this a chunker of a book?
Not at all. T. Kingfisher tends to write novellas in the first place, and I feel like maybe her editor was like, "Hey, can you like beef this one up a little bit and make it into a novel?" And it was really well done.
Yeah,
but nothing, no fluffy bits where you feel like there was extra parts added in.
right.
It was just really, really complete with a satisfying ending.
Sounds really good.
Yeah.
So my last book is Drowning by T.J. Newman. This was published in May of 2023 by Avid Reader Press, which I believe is a division of Simon & Schuster. Mm-hmm. This book, without a doubt, is a thriller. And not only that, but it was a hold on to your hat, don't forget to breathe kind of thriller.
Ooh.
I mean, I'm not exaggerating. From the first page, you are in it. And the setup is that 6 minutes after takeoff, a flight out of Honolulu crashes and falls into the ocean. Flight 1421. And many of the passengers who do survive the crash, I mean, not everybody survives, just the fact that they crash into the ocean, but they start evacuating the plane, which is floating for now. And most of the passengers who are still alive get out, and they're floating in rafts now around the plane. But one of the engines explodes, and this massive fire, and of course there's all this fuel that's floating on the surface of the water that starts to burn. So floating in a flimsy raft is not a really safe option. So there's 12 people who haven't gotten off the plane yet. And they make a decision that it might be safer to stay on board and wait for rescue. So they seal up the doors. And moments after they do that, the plane sinks into the ocean. There is an elite dive team that is attempting a rescue. But the question is, will they be successful before the plane teeters off the cliff that it's very precariously resting on and then sink all the way to the ocean floor, which would mean it would be impossible to rescue anybody. This book has what I call Cheeto chapters. And I have to give credit to that term to the gals on the Currently Reading podcast.
Mm-hmm.
A Cheeto chapter, those are short chapters that usually end in a cliffhanger, making you want just one more.
Yeah. Love
Anyway,
it.
there's family dynamics on this. There's a man and his daughter who are on the plane waiting to be rescued. And one of the members, or actually the woman who's leading this elite dive team, is actually his soon-to-be ex-wife and the mother of this young girl.
Christ.
And so the dive team is in major conflict with the government, who has another idea completely on how these people should be rescued, which the people in the know realize is going to end in disaster.
Yeah.
And so we're really holding our breath to see if this dive team actually succeeds in accomplishing the mission and getting down to the plane and somehow managing to get these 12 people off. The characters are really diverse and interesting. You know, there's quite a cast of characters, the people who are trapped on the plane, the woman leading the dive team, you know, has her own issues. Anyway, the book goes so fast. I read this book in within 24 hours for sure.
It sounds
I
like a
just
good
got in
summer
my
read
chair,
too.
and it's like the world could just carry on, whatever, but I wasn't moving. I was going to finish that book. And
Tell us the name again and the author.
Drowning. And Drowning is it's written, the author, T.J. Newman, is a former flight attendant. And so she really knows what she's talking about when she describes the plane and the emergency systems and protocols that flight attendants have to follow in an emergency. So it's extremely realistic from that point of view. Wow. Drowning was her sophomore book. Her first book was called Falling, which was amazing as well. But I think I actually, of the two of them, I liked Drowning the best.
Was Falling also based, of course, around planes and travel?
Oh, yeah. And it's about a flight, and something happens during the flight that, you know, jeopardizes all the people. And, you know, it's a similar theme.
I think this might be too thrilling for me. I don't know.
Well, you definitely would. You wouldn't want to pick it up when you were, you know, this is not what you buy at the airport bookshop to ride on the plane. No. But I mean, both of those books go so fast and they're so entertaining, and you just can't flip those pages fast enough to find out how it's all going to turn out. Really, really good.
Cool. All right. So my last 5-star read so far for the year is by a new to me author, Yumi Kitase. The book is called The Deep Sky. This was published on July 18th, a year ago, basically, so 2023, by Flatiron Books. And this is a very gripping sci-fi but thriller, and it is very sciencey, like Andy Weir writes science, like The Martian. So it's a bit cerebral and discussing some of these like concepts of physics and whatnot, but still enjoyable, still approachable. This is about a deep space mission that takes a deadly turn when an explosion leaves the crew questioning each other's loyalty. So it's a little bit locked room mystery and thriller, but we are also going back in time like every other chapter, because the entire crew is comprised of women. There are no men. And so I'll get to the synopsis here. So on the brink of Earth's environmental collapse, a ship carrying 80 elite graduates sets off to save humanity by establishing a new generation in space. But halfway through to their destination, a bomb kills 3 crew members and knocks the Phoenix, which is their ship, off course. So Asuka is the only surviving witness and also becomes the prime suspect. So she has to navigate and sort of go through the motions of figuring out this locked room type of mystery. There's a lot of tension and suspicion amongst the crew. A lot of trust begins to erode. And then as she's trying to figure out who the main suspect is going to be, we go back in time, as I said, to learning more about each character because they all, as children, applied to be a part of this. I don't want to say NASA, but like, let's say it was a NASA type of mission where you could apply and they were only taking like 11-year-olds. So all 11-year-olds could apply, only females. And then they spent the rest of their childhood and young adult hood learning and going to class and trying to make the top 80, which most of them did. And there's also a lot of technology. Of course, this is much, much further forward in the future, maybe another 100 or 200 years. And it was just interesting to see the pressure that all of these women have, starting from when they were children, and how they relate to one another and the friendships and the rivalries that were built. I also thought, again, a very feminist book. There is no need for men in this future that they are creating. They have this is a bit much, but they've got sperm donations from top male minds and athletes that have contributed toward this mission in that way, so that these women can have children in the future. And again, we are really only choosing to have the best of the best genetics, which I didn't love, but interesting concept. So I thought this was a fantastic book. There's a bird theme throughout this book where this bird theme gives some hints and some clues to personalities of some of the characters. Just very interesting references. So anyway, loved it. 5 stars, gripping.
Wow.
So yeah. Well, all right. So what books are you loving lately?
Right now, I finished a book by Claire Lombardo called Same as It Ever Was. And that book is very recently published. I mean, it came out like last week.
Yeah.
It's a big book. It's over 500 pages and it's a family drama. And I can't wait to share the details about it. It's sitting with me and I'm trying to formulate my thoughts. It gave me a lot of feelings. That was definitely going to be one of my top books of the year. No question about it.
Oh, wow.
Right now, I started The Return of Ellie Black, which you gave me for my birthday.
Yeah.
And it's a story about a missing girl who is discovered wandering around in the woods two years after her abduction. And it's very well written. This author wrote a couple of books before this, one of which I read and I didn't like. When I'll review that one later, and I'll be sure and have her other past work in front of me so I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But I think I've been really concentrating this summer in particular, like all through May and June. I've been reading books with kind of a lighter theme. I've read a lot of romance. I've read what I would classify as women's fiction, some contemporary fiction, books that are kind of humorous. And I think that's about to change. I think I'm getting into the mood to read some books with heavier topics. Same as It Ever Was by Claire Lombardo is a perfect example of that. Okay. But there are so many good books that have just, this last week was an incredible week for books being published. And the Book of the Month Club selections have just come out. I bought 5 books from Book of the Month this last time. And some of them that I've ordered and that I cannot wait to read. They're by tried and true authors that I have read in the past, and I know I'm going to love these books. I'm expecting them all to be 5 stars. So some of them are God of the Woods by Liz Moore.
I got that one. Her previous
book was Long Bright River, which was very good. All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. His last book was We Begin at the End, which I didn't care for, but everybody is raving about All the Colors of the Dark as being, one of the best books of the year. So I'm going to try it.
Oh, yeah. I did not get that one. So you'll have to let me know.
I will. And then Same as It Ever Was just came out and I have read that one, and it was definitely 5 stars. And the other book that I got was The Same Bright Stars by an author named Ethan Joella. I
Mhm.
absolutely adore this author. And he's one of these people that in actual life is just an absolute sweetheart of a person.
Yeah.
He wrote 2 other books, both of which I gave 5 stars or close to it and loved. He wrote A Quiet Life and
Mhm.
A Little Hope.
Great.
And they're both quiet books that are character studies, and when you finish, your heart feels good. So
Ooh,
I love his books. So
good.
that's what I have coming down the pipeline.
Did you include him, that last author that you mentioned in your notes for me?
Yes, I've got a list of
Okay.
those
Um,
authors.
what I'll do is make sure that all of the books we've mentioned are going to be in the show notes after we are done. And the book that I'm really looking forward to, as I said, I'm currently reading Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookshop by Robin Sloan. Takes place in San Francisco. And the next one that I got that I'm really looking forward to from Book of the Month was Bad Tourists by Caro Carver. And this one takes place in the Maldives. And it's kind of a luxury page turner thriller. And that's usually not quite my thing. But I read the first few pages and I was just sucked right in. I was like, whoa, okay. I'm I want more. So
Are
um
these rich people behaving badly?
yes.
I
So
love
best
that.
yeah.
Love that trope.
Um, right. I mean, so why not? Why not? And really, um, I think they are quite devious, these characters. So we'll see. All right.
Terrific.
Well, thanks, Mom. This was really fun. And I'll list all of these for everyone in the notes.
Great. Great. I look
And
forward to
all right.
our next
Uh,
podcast.
yep. And looking forward to more great reads. Thanks, Mom.
Yes, same here.